In the vast expanse of space, humanity had always wondered if we were alone. That question was answered on a cold Tuesday morning when massive crystalline ships appeared in Earth's orbit. The aliens called themselves the Nexarians, a species that had conquered countless worlds through their apparent immortality. Their bodies could regenerate from almost any injury, making them nearly impossible to kill. They arrived with the same confidence they'd shown on 100 other worlds, expecting Earth to fall just as easily. The first transmission they sent was simple: surrender now, and we'll make this painless. You know what humanity's response was? We laughed. Not because we weren't scared, we were terrified, but because after millennia of fighting amongst ourselves, we'd become really, really good at figuring out how to kill things that didn't want to die. I was there when they landed their first wave in downtown Chicago. I worked security at the Willis Tower, watching through reinforced windows as their crystalline dropships descended like deadly icicles from the sky. The Nexarians emerged, 9 feet tall with translucent skin that seemed to shimmer in the morning sun. They expected screaming crowds and easy targets. Instead, they found empty streets. What they didn't know was that humans had been preparing for alien invasions since before we had rockets. Every movie, every book, every video game about fighting aliens, they weren't just entertainment. They were rehearsals. While the Nexarians were busy congratulating themselves on finding another primitive world to conquer, we were already implementing plans that had existed for decades. The first human they encountered was an old janitor who seemed to be calmly sweeping the street. When their commander approached him, demanding Earth's surrender, the old man just smiled and said, "Son, you really should have done your homework." That's when all hell broke loose. See, while the Nexarians could regenerate from almost anything, they'd never encountered a species that had spent its entire existence finding creative ways to trap, contain, and disable threats. They could heal from bullets, sure, but they couldn't heal if they were encased in rapidly expanding industrial foam. They could regenerate limbs, but that didn't help much when they were stuck in electromagnetic nets that scrambled their crystalline nervous systems. The old janitor turned out to be a retired Special Forces operator, and that broom. It was packed with enough smart nanites to disable an entire squad. Within minutes, the first wave of unkillable aliens found themselves immobilized, confused, and, for the first time in their long lives, afraid. But this was just the beginning. As I watched from my post, I saw humanity's real response unfold. Construction workers used their equipment to create instant barriers, trapping alien units in kill zones. City planners activated emergency systems that turned entire blocks into elaborate traps. Even the pigeons turned out to be surveillance drones, coordinating our defense with precision that would have made any military strategist proud. The Nexarians had made a crucial mistake. They assumed that because we couldn't kill them, we couldn't beat them. They never considered that humanity's greatest strength wasn't our ability to kill. It was our ability to adapt, to improvise, and to overcome impossible odds. We didn't need to kill them. We just needed to stop them. As I helped coordinate the building's defense systems, watching the supposedly invincible aliens being systematically contained and neutralized, I couldn't help but smile. The Nexarians had traveled across galaxies, conquered countless worlds, and evolved beyond death itself. But they were about to learn a lesson that every human child knows. Just because you can't die doesn't mean you can't lose. This is the story of how humanity taught the unkillable aliens the meaning of regret. And trust me, this is only the beginning. The days that followed were a masterclass in human ingenuity. While the Nexarians regrouped in orbit, we transformed our cities into intricate defensive networks. Every construction site became a fortress, every subway tunnel a potential trap. The aliens had expected to find primitive weapons and chaotic resistance. Instead, they found themselves facing the combined creativity of an entire species that had spent centuries preparing for this moment, even if we hadn't known it. I remember watching from the command center we'd set up in the Willis Tower basement as reports came in from around the globe. In Tokyo, they'd modified their earthquake dampening systems to create resonance fields that disrupted the aliens' crystalline structure. The London Underground had become a labyrinth of electromagnetic pulses and containment zones. And in Rio, they'd somehow managed to reprogram Carnival parade robots into autonomous defense units. The Nexarians' second wave came at dawn, a week after their first disastrous landing. This time, they thought they were prepared. They'd analyzed our initial tactics and developed countermeasures. Their new armor was resistant to our foam compounds, and they'd installed shields against electromagnetic interference. They dropped into major cities worldwide, confident they'd solved the puzzle of humanity's resistance. They hadn't counted on how quickly we could adapt. A street vendor in Mumbai discovered that their crystalline bodies reacted badly to certain sound frequencies. Within hours, every speaker system on Earth was being reprogrammed. Construction workers in Sydney found that mixing certain common chemicals created a gas that temporarily solidified their liquid crystal biology. Soon, every fire suppression system was being modified. But our greatest advantage wasn't our technology or our traps. It was our ability to work together. Former rivals pooled resources, ancient enemies shared intelligence, and competitors freely gave away trade secrets that could help in the fight. The Nexarians couldn't understand it. In their society, survival meant standing alone. Proving your immortality made you superior. They'd never encountered a species that grew stronger by supporting its weakest members. I'll never forget the moment we realized we were actually winning. One of their commanders, finally captured after a 3-hour chase through Chicago's financial district, asked me something that changed my understanding of the conflict. "Why do you keep fighting?" It said, genuine confusion in its crystalline eyes. "We cannot die. You cannot win." The response came from a young tech specialist working nearby. Without looking up from her tablet, where she was coordinating containment protocols, she simply said, "We're not trying to kill you. We're trying to teach you a lesson." The alien's expression shifted to something I can only describe as fear, not of death, which they couldn't experience, but of something far more terrifying to them, the possibility of change. As the third week of the invasion began, we noticed a shift in their tactics. The Nexarians started attempting communication that wasn't just demands for surrender. Their ships moved into less aggressive positions. Some even retreated to the outer edges of our solar system. They'd encountered something entirely new in their millennia of conquest. A species that didn't just fight back, but fought smart. But we knew better than to celebrate too early. The Nexarians were immortal, yes, but they were also patient. And as I stood in that command center, watching the patterns of their fleet movements change, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were learning, adapting, just like we were. They might be retreating, but something told me they weren't done. They were planning something big, something that would test humanity's ingenuity like never before. The real question wasn't whether we could outsmart them again. It was whether we could do it fast enough to survive what came next. The Nexarians' next move caught us completely off guard. After 3 weeks of apparent retreat, they unleashed what they thought would be their ultimate weapon. They started using their immortality in ways we hadn't anticipated. Their ships began deliberately crashing into our defense installations, their crystalline hulls shattering and reforming in endless cycles. Each impact was like a meteor strike, and they assumed we eventually run out of ways to contain them. What they didn't expect was that we turned their own strategy against them. As their ships rained down, we started using their regenerating crystal fragments to power our own devices. Every piece they left behind became a battery for our containment fields. The more they destroyed themselves, the stronger our defenses grew. A high school chemistry teacher in Boston figured out how to use their crystalline structure to create sustainable energy sources. Soon, we weren't just defending. We were thriving. The turning point came during what we now call the Silicon Valley Gambit. The Nexarians had targeted our major tech hubs, thinking that destroying our infrastructure would cripple our coordination. They didn't realize that every social media platform, every gaming server, and every video sharing site had been converted into a vast neural network for predicting their movements. Teenagers with gaming computers were running battle simulations. Food delivery apps were coordinating supply lines. Even dating apps were being used to match defensive capabilities with the areas that needed them most. I was monitoring the feeds when we detected their massive mothership moving into position above the Pacific Ocean. This wasn't just another attack. This was their endgame. The ship was larger than Manhattan, its crystalline surface reflecting sunlight like a second moon. Our scientists estimated that if it underwent total regenerative collapse, the energy release could devastate half the planet. The global response was immediate. Fishing boats became sensor platforms. Surfers carried specially designed disruptor devices in their boards. Beach volleyball courts concealed electromagnetic pulse generators. We had turned every hobby, every ordinary activity, into a potential defense mechanism. The Nexarians still couldn't understand how a species could be so individually vulnerable yet so collectively resourceful. As the mothership began its descent, we detected something unprecedented in their communications: doubt. For the first time in their history of conquest, they were facing a species that saw their immortality not as an insurmountable advantage, but as a resource to be used. Every defeat taught us more about their biology. Every failed attack gave us new materials to study. The air grew thick with tension as their ship hung above the ocean, its crystal surface pulsing with energy. In command centers around the world, humans from every nation watched and waited. We had one chance to prove that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in our ability to destroy, but in our capacity to adapt and overcome. Everything we had learned, every strategy we had developed, every piece of their own technology we had reproposed, it all came down to this moment. The Nexarians' final transmission was different from their usual threats. "Your species," their commander announced, "has proven interesting." The words carried a weight we hadn't heard before. They were preparing something unprecedented, something that would either break us completely or fundamentally change the relationship between our species forever. As I stood at my station, watching the massive ship begin its transformation, I realized we were about to witness either humanity's greatest triumph or our last stand. The question wasn't whether we could survive. It was whether we could turn even this, their most desperate attack, into another example of human ingenuity. The sky began to crystallize, and the real battle was about to begin. The mothership's transformation was unlike anything we'd seen before. Instead of shattering or regenerating, it began to dissolve, turning into billions of crystalline particles that filled the sky like a shimmering aurora. Our sensors went crazy as each particle proved to be a microscopic version of the Nexarians themselves. They weren't trying to destroy us. They were trying to merge with our atmosphere. That's when we discovered their true intention. The Nexarians hadn't come to conquer Earth. They'd come to make it their new breeding ground. Each particle was designed to bond with organic matter, slowly transforming our biosphere into a crystalline hybrid. They thought they'd found the perfect solution. Instead of fighting humanity, they would simply remake us in their image. But they'd made a crucial miscalculation. Decades of pollution and environmental challenges had forced humans to become experts at atmospheric manipulation. Climate scientists quickly realized that the same techniques we developed to fight global warming could be modified to contain the crystalline transformation. Weather control stations originally built to seed clouds for rain were reproposed to create containment barriers in the sky. The most incredible response came from an unexpected source: our social media influencers. Their massive networks, usually used for sharing trends and memes, became instant communication channels for coordinating global defense efforts. Smartphone cameras could detect the crystalline particles, and soon millions of people were using filter apps to track and map the transformation's spread. I watched in awe as ordinary citizens became our frontline defenders. Farmers used irrigation systems to create protective moisture barriers. Kids with drone toys became aerial reconnaissance pilots. Even the pigeons we'd fitted with surveillance gear started showing signs of resistance to the crystalline transformation, their bodies naturally developing countermeasures we could study and replicate. Then came the real shock. Some humans, particularly those with rare genetic markers, didn't reject the crystalline particles. They adapted to them. Instead of being transformed, they gained the ability to communicate with the Nexarian consciousness. These individuals became our translators, helping us understand our enemies in ways we never could before. Through them, we learned the truth about the Nexarians' immortality. It wasn't a sign of their superiority. It was a desperate evolutionary response to a catastrophe that had nearly wiped out their species eons ago. They weren't conquerors by choice. They were refugees endlessly searching for a way to break free from their crystalline prison. As this revelation spread through our defense networks, I noticed a change in how we fought. Our containment strategies shifted from defensive to collaborative. Instead of just stopping the transformation, we began trying to control it, to find a way to help the Nexarians without losing our own humanity. The sky above the Pacific had become a swirling dance of light and shadow, human technology and alien biology locked in a complex battle for balance. But as I coordinated responses from my station, watching the patterns of interaction between our countermeasures and their particles, I realized we weren't just fighting anymore. We were on the verge of something unprecedented, a solution that could change both our species forever. Just then, our sensors detected a new energy signature forming in the crystalline cloud. The Nexarians weren't retreating, and they weren't pressing their attack. They were attempting something they'd never done before, something that would either solve both our species' problems or trigger a catastrophe beyond anything we prepared for. The question was, would we risk everything on the chance to turn an ancient enemy into an ally? The energy signature in the crystalline cloud began to pulse with a rhythm that matched Earth's natural magnetic field. Through our translators, we learned the Nexarians had discovered something extraordinary. Human emotional responses could temporarily destabilize their crystalline structure. Our capacity for empathy, something they'd initially seen as weakness, was actually the key to breaking their immortal prison. What happened next became known as the resonance event. Using a global network of modified cell phone towers, we broadcast a specific frequency that amplified human emotional patterns. The crystalline cloud above the Pacific began to vibrate in sync with these broadcasts, creating waves of iridescent light that rippled across the sky like a living aurora. The Nexarians' consciousness merged with our broadcast, sharing their entire history with us in a moment. We felt their ancient pain, their loss, and their desperate search for a way to feel truly alive again. In return, they experienced the full spectrum of human emotions, our joys, fears, loves, and sorrows. The connection was overwhelming, bringing many to tears, both human and Nexarian alike. That's when our scientists made the breakthrough. By combining our electromagnetic containment fields with the Nexarians' regenerative abilities, we could create a controlled transformation process. The crystalline particles wouldn't change us. Instead, they would form a symbiotic layer in our atmosphere, protecting Earth from cosmic radiation while allowing the Nexarians to experience life as mortal beings again. The process began slowly at first, with volunteer humans working alongside accepting Nexarians. Their crystalline forms began to shift, becoming more organic while retaining their regenerative properties. But they could now feel, age, and most importantly, truly live again. In exchange, humanity gained the ability to tap into their vast knowledge of the cosmos and their regenerative technology for healing purposes only. Just as we thought we'd achieved the perfect resolution, our sensors detected a new anomaly. A small group of Nexarians, unable to accept the loss of their immortality, had hidden themselves deep within Earth's oceans. They were adapting to the water pressure, creating crystalline structures that could withstand the depths. But instead of presenting a new threat, they offered an unexpected opportunity. These deep-sea Nexarians discovered they could bond with Earth's marine life, creating a new ecosystem that could help clean our polluted oceans. Their presence in the depths became a reminder that sometimes the best solutions come from embracing change rather than fighting it. The final surprise came 3 months later. The combined effect of human emotion and Nexarian regeneration had created something entirely new in Earth's atmosphere. A living shield that could think and adapt. This shield not only protected us from external threats, but also helped regulate our climate, beginning to reverse the centuries of environmental damage. As I stand here now, looking up at the sky shimmering with its new crystalline layer, I can't help but smile at the irony. The Nexarians came to Earth expecting to find another conquest, but instead they found their salvation, and humanity, in helping an enemy become an ally, discovered strengths we never knew we had. The old janitor who faced down the first Nexarian invasion force still sweeps the streets of Chicago, but now he sweeps alongside a former Nexarian commander, both of them sharing stories and laughs. Their friendship, like so many others that formed in the aftermath, stands as a testament to the truth we all learned. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating your enemies, but from helping them find what they didn't know they were looking for. The universe is vast and full of dangers, but now Earth stands as a beacon of hope, a place where immortal beings learned how to live again, and where humanity proved that our greatest strength lies not in our ability to fight, but in our capacity to understand, adapt, and grow together. A year has passed since the resonance event, and Earth has changed in ways none of us could have imagined. The crystalline shield in our atmosphere creates spectacular light shows each sunset, a daily reminder of how close we came to war and how far we've come instead. Kids now play games projecting their thoughts into small crystalline sculptures, while their parents use similar technology to communicate with relatives across the globe. The deep-sea Nexarian colonies have become vital research centers, working alongside human marine biologists to restore coral reefs and clean up ocean pollution. Their crystalline structures, once meant for warfare, now form the foundation of new underwater habitats where humans and Nexarians study Earth's oceans together. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch, that massive collection of plastic waste, is being transformed into a floating city using Nexarian regenerative technology combined with human engineering. But perhaps the most profound changes are the smallest ones. In parks across the world, you'll find meditation circles where humans help former Nexarians navigate the complexities of mortal emotions. In return, they teach us about the stars, sharing stories of distant worlds and ancient civilizations. Some of the most popular cooking shows now feature Nexarian chefs discovering taste and texture for the first time, their childlike wonder at simple flavors reminding us to appreciate the small joys we often take for granted. The Willis Tower, where I watched the invasion begin, has been transformed into a joint human Nexarian cultural center. The old security cameras that once tracked enemy movements now record history in the making as both species work together to solve problems neither could tackle alone. The command center in the basement, where we once coordinated our defenses, is now a classroom where children learn about both earth science and crystalline biology. Last week, I attended a remarkable ceremony. The old janitor who faced down the first invasion force received an award for his bravery, but he insisted on sharing it with the Nexarian commander he first encountered. Together, they launched a program teaching young humans and Nexarians about the importance of understanding before action, of seeking connection before conflict. Their unlikely friendship has become a symbol of everything we've achieved. The Nexarians' original ships, those massive crystalline vessels that once darkened our skies, haven't been destroyed. Instead, they've been repurposed as space stations, their regenerative properties protecting human astronauts as we take our first real steps into deep space exploration. Several joint missions are already planned, with human creativity and Nexarian knowledge working together to unlock the mysteries of the cosmos. As I finish recording this story, I can see a group of children playing in the park below my window. Some have the slight crystalline sheen that marks them as first-generation human Nexarian hybrids, their parents having chosen to partially adopt the crystalline biology. They're teaching their fully human friends how to create small light displays with their thoughts, while nearby, a former Nexarian elder watches with tears in his eyes, still amazed by his ability to feel emotion. That's the real lesson we learned from the invasion that never was. The Nexarians came looking for another conquest, but found a home instead. Humanity faced what seemed like an unbeatable enemy and discovered a friend. Together, we've created something entirely new, a future neither species could have achieved alone. And as for those strange lights you sometimes see dancing in the sky at night, that's just our resident deep-sea Nexarians communicating with their atmospheric cousins, sharing stories about their latest discoveries in the depths of our oceans. It's their way of reminding us that sometimes the best endings aren't endings at all. They're just beautiful new beginnings. After all, in a universe full of possibilities, the greatest adventure is learning to see through each other's eyes, even if those eyes happen to be crystalline.